Hello, and welcome to the third of our series of presentations, New Frontiers of Assessment. Delighted to have you with us for this. I am the Chair, Fiona Harvey. I am the faculty lead for learning technology in social and historical sciences at UCL. So we're delighted that you could join us today. Just to run through a format, what we're going to be happening today. Before I do that, I just want to say thank you to our headline sponsor, PSI. And in addition, the British Council and City and Guilds for sponsoring both the awards that we're running today, the Best Workplace or Talent Assessment Project Award and the Best International Implementation Award. So the agenda for the session today, so we will be having a presentation from Eric Shepherd, the Executive Director of Talent Transformation. And then what we'll do after that, we will have a Q&A with Eric. Then we will have the presentations for the first award, with the Best International Implementation Award, which will be presented by the British Council and Sarah Pearson. After that, there'll be a break. We'll have 10 minutes where you can join us in the AirMeet platform, or you can stay on and you can keep your comments going through the live stream here. Then after the break, we'll have the next presentation for the Best Workplace or Talent Assessment Project, which is presented by City and Guilds, which is Patrick Craven. Following that, we'll have a discussion with the panel, and then we'll close, and then we can go back to the AirMeet networking. So as part of our presentation this afternoon with Eric, we're going to be giving away copies of his book, Talent Transformation. There are 6 copies that Eric's very kindly donated to us, and the winners will be selected from the people participating at the conference today. So without much further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Eric Shepherd. He's the Executive Director of Talent Transformation. He's an accomplished leader for international businesses and associations focused on talent and assessments and success. Eric has led an industry and standards initiatives to promote best practices for assessment, learning and interoperability. And he is a recognized expert in the assessment field, and also he's a winner of the E-Assessment Association's 2019 Lifetime Contribution Award. Over to you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Fiona. It's wonderful to be here, and it's a real privilege to be invited. So thank you so much. So today I thought you might find it helpful for me to take you on a journey into the future and just think about what could be happening, should be happening, and how the pandemic has kind of helped the e-assessment industry, and how we can kind of take advantage and benefit our societies with that. So I put my contact details here. I am not affiliated to any commercial organization. The Talent Transformation Guild is kind of a philanthropic effort that I do to try and help people understand the future of work, learning, and leadership. So I wanted to share with you an inspirational moment that I had. In my 30 years in the assessment industry, I was involved with doing lots of presentations. And I was doing a presentation in Salt Lake City, and someone said to me, can you distinguish competence and competencies and skills? And at the time, I kind of gave everybody a blank stare and stumbled. And that motivated me to say, I have to get to the bottom of this. How does this all link together? Because there's a combination in competence of, at the time, were called leadership skills. Now everybody needs leadership skills, so more behaviors. So out of that, when I stepped down from a kind of full-time role and I had time to think, and I traveled the world and started developing this thing called the Talent Transformation Pyramid. And it was really trying to put together, from a CEO's perspective, how competencies are supported and why there was these kind of two separate tracks in the world of assessment. There was kind of assessment of behaviors and personality and social emotional intelligence, and then there was assessments of functional skills and capabilities. And I came to this conclusion that one, it's about the probabilities. So what's the probability of someone behaving in a particular way in a certain situation? And then on the other side, it was much more of a kind of a pass-fail kind of score. So let me do that. So the just isolating, now some people would call these soft skills, some people call them other things. I kind of think that the way we behave is supported by the situation that we're in. So we've been all working from home, and that's different than working in an office. And we behave differently than when we go to see a sports game or when we eat in a fine dining restaurant. So situation impacts our behavior, but then we have the underpinnings of who we are, our personality, our desires, our interests, etc. So that's kind of one side of that pyramid. The other side is around these capabilities and how capable are we of performing tasks. And that's dependent on the environment, the tools, the information, and also the knowledge and skills that we all know so well. So we put this together in this pyramid, and in the middle there was competencies, which I've circled in red to highlight. And as we went around to organizations, we generally found that on the left-hand side, we saw between 5 and 15 competencies defined. And at the time, there were more leadership competencies. I'm going to come back to why they're now competencies for everyone. And then on the right-hand side for capabilities and functional skills, we saw them hundreds, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of capabilities and technical and functional skills are being defined. So this was another reason there was kind of a discrepancy. You know, on one side, we just had 5 to 15 behaviors or leadership skills defined. The other sides, there could be tens or hundreds. So if I think of a regulated industry, they might have a competency defined for explaining certain rules and regulations or certain safety behaviors. So in assessment industry, I know PSI is a headline sponsor, they do a great job on assessing both sides of this pyramid, and some others will specialize on one side or the other. So as we kind of drill down on this, I started working with the IEEE, defining data standards around competencies and best practices for defining competencies, and also working with the T3 initiative, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about. And there was a clear correlation between the job, the tasks that we perform in the job, and then the behaviors and functions that we need to perform the task. So if we're a manager, we might have to facilitate a team meeting. If we're a banker, we might have to perform within the terms of the regulatory guidelines. So we have to know those things. So what we can know and what we do, it requires this. So if we then think, well, the nature of work is changing. So we all know that the pandemic accelerated work from home, but we also see the acceleration of the use of drones, of using exoskeletons to lift heavy weights and help the disabled, the physically disabled. We see the empathetic robots come in where people are alone and we don't have physical contact, the use of empathetic robots. Smart devices doing speech recognition. And as we return back to travel, use of hotels, we'll see more facial recognition for hospitality, and of course, security, biosecurity. So the point here is the nature of work is changing. So how is that changing these tasks? Well, what's happening is that the machines are now doing the repetitive tasks. So as we moved from the farm to the factory, our education systems were geared up to teach us the repetitive tasks. We just really had to be machines. And so our education taught us English language skills or language skills. I know there's a multinational audience here. So we were taught language skills, mathematics, science, etc. And a lot of that was just used in repetitive tasks. But the robots are coming, automation is coming, that those machines are going to do that. So as you look forward in your career, you might want to be thinking, where am I going to add value that a robot is not going to do that repetitive task? So what we see is that those tasks I had listed before, A, B, C, D, 2 of them are going to go away, but 2 new ones are going to come along. So we're going to have all this upskilling and reskilling. And there's some surprising insights that's coming from data. For instance, accountants that are particularly vulnerable because machines can do audits almost more effectively than an accountant, as they can sweep through lots of data and see patterns more easily than a person. It turns out that those accountants are really good cybersecurity analysts. So they can see patterns in data and they can assist with the AI and machine learning that's going on for cybersecurity. So it's not all lost. We're not all going to be put out of jobs, but we're going to have to be more creative, more agile about the work we do. So let's kind of think a bit more about competencies. So we know the tasks are going to change. So if the tasks are going to change, the competencies we need to perform those tasks are going to be changing. I think we've all seen this, we all know this, but here's one kind of diagrammatic way of representing this, where the columns are illustrating the competencies or the defined competencies, and then the depth of each bar is kind of the level of competence. So what we find is that we can define what a job needs from a level of competence standpoint and competency definitions, and we can see what an individual has. And so it's much easier at that level to do a gap analysis, so we can see which of the competencies need to be learned. Now, if we do it at a degree level, if we just said, well, this job needs this degree, it doesn't really encourage lifelong learning or the agility that required to learn these new skills as they get added on to job roles as some tasks and thereby competencies disappear. So this idea of getting down to competencies is a key aspect. So I think we're aware that or certainly my parents and my grandparents, they would go to school, they would go to college, they would then work probably with 1, 2, or 3 jobs through their life, and they'd retire. But that's all changing now. What's happening now is we go to school, potentially college, but we'll have to keep returning to the learning process. And we've talked about this for 20 years, lifelong learning. But this is becoming very, very poignant now as automation is taking away tasks that were previously performed by humans. So the nature of school, the nature of college is going to have to change to add more of these 21st century skills, cooperation, collaboration. And to be a little controversial, I would say that the assessment industry has influenced education to just train on logical skills. We haven't been so good at encouraging these 21st century skills because they're more difficult to assess. But those are the skills that are needed in the earliest point that we can teach kids about cooperation, collaboration, getting along with others, conflict resolution, etc. So the nature of education in schools will change, not only to prepare people for work, but to prepare people to learn and to prepare people to get along with one another. Okay, so that's changing. So our old industrial way of thinking was we'd start on the left, we'd go to school, we develop these capabilities and behaviors, which we knew what they were because we'd been going from the farm to the factory and getting ready for the factory for a long time. So we knew what they were. The same with post-secondary education. If we exclude research, we just go for post-secondary education. So that was the way it's kind of workplace would receive individuals with certain capabilities and behaviors. And then we'd have to go through an onboarding program. We'd have to teach people about the culture, etc. But what we're seeing now is kind of the reverse needs to happen and is happening and was happening during the pandemic. So the workplace is now saying, well, for people to be successful working in our place, they need to have these capabilities and behaviors. They need to be able to cooperate with people at a distance. They need to be able to communicate. They need to be able to write. They need whatever it is. So the workplace now is taking on a greater responsibility to define these. How do they define them? They define them in competencies. So now we can think, here's a diagram of all the people that, or all the stakeholders that kind of involved in this process of developing a talent marketplace that is going to be more successful for our society. And I would say that employers are not going to define everything. There's other things that we need to learn at school and education, but there needs to be a better communication system between businesses and education and credentialing organizations. So I'm going to put up a much more complex diagram here and just kind of talk you through it. So if we start at the bottom here, we've got this concept of learner wallets coming in. So a wallet is a bit like a physical wallet, or the wallet you might have on your smartphone, but it's a wallet that holds your credentials, your educational history, your employment history. With that data, a smart app could then start looking at the cloud data and work out what's possible, what's good. We could also bring in kind of personality data. We could bring in your interests, your traits, your style, your preferences, your values, your strengths. We could commingle that with the competencies that you already have. We could then say, well, if you're interested in earning lots of money and sacrificing your personal life, you might look at this kind of career. And if you're interested in developing a home life and having your work not so be impactful, you might want to look at that. So what's the kind of data we need for that? Well, we need to know some occupation data. We need to know the salary data that's linked to that. We need to know what competencies are required for those occupations. So we can do some comparisons there. If we have a wallet with our credentials listed, we'd really want to know, well, what competencies have I already have? So maybe I have an MBA and I've already got some communication skills that I've demonstrated. So maybe I don't have to go and get another degree to include that. I just need the other bits I need. Maybe I'm interested in social media and marketing. So I already have those. So rather than have to redo that, I can just add this. So this brings it into the micro-credentials, micro-learning. And we're certainly not short of materials to learn from. We look at YouTube, we look at Coursera, Udemy, etc. So credential organizations, in my belief, will start breaking down, and you should be looking at this, breaking down the qualifications into the credentials in a way that they can be matched. The education systems should be doing the same thing. So a person could say, that's the specific piece I want to learn. Governments and policymakers, they need to look at a region and say, what are the competencies that we need to attract, teach, learn, build within our community? They'll, by the work we're doing at the IEEE and the T3 in the Chamber of Commerce Foundation, we'll see much more open competency definitions and systems to make these discoverable and reusable. We'll see data suppliers come along with salary data that we can then commingle with this other data. And then, of course, employers, when they do job postings, they can post to that competency level for these individual apps to interrogate. So with that, I just leave a few of my contact details here. I really do enjoy talking with people, learning from people. I'm not going to be turning up trying to sell you anything, but if you want to reach out, feel free to do so. And with that, I'd be very happy to answer some questions, Fiona.
That was really interesting. I've got lots of questions now. Thank you for sharing that with us. But I obviously, anyone that if they do have any questions can place them into the chat and we can ask Eric. We will also be having Eric talk to us through our panel later on. But one thing that just struck me about that, so you talked a lot about work change kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I know that change is hard for lots of people. So different generations find things different, don't they? They find things harder. So how do we bring people along with us as we're changing this in this new frontier of workplace kind of thing?
That's a really good question. So I think there's two parts to that. One is that to nip the problem in the bud, to be teaching in schools and higher education to say your life is going to be different. You are going to need to be agile. You are going to have to embrace change. And I think we're already seeing that in our younger generations, that they embrace change. Secondly, yeah, it is hard. You know, as an old white guy, I can tell you it's kind of hard to change. But you look at the consequences for not changing. What are you going to do? And so with any change management, whether it's at an individual level, team level, organizational level, you got to look at the consequences of not changing, and then the opportunities of changing, and which normally means learning in order to be ready for that change. And you have to acknowledge there will be a risk. And how do you mitigate that risk? So I could spend a lot of time learning and not get a better job. That's a risk. Okay, well, how do I mitigate that risk? Well, I'm going to do some research to make sure I'm learning the right things that actually resonate with my personality, my style, my preferences, my interests.
That's really, and I guess too, I mean, we've got some technology that we've had a long time, like e-portfolios, and that came into, they were quite popular, and then they sort of faded out a little bit, because it's quite hard to keep a record of everything you've been doing and to reflect back on those things and see how that fits with a new job or whatever. So, and I guess as well, as you change into different types of careers across your lifetime, like you were saying, that people don't just stay in the same job anymore, it's useful to be able to refer back to what you did do and see what skills you did develop in those particular roles and how they now apply. So it's quite difficult to do that on pieces of paper, and it's even quite difficult to do it if it's not in any kind of like the wallet. I love that idea of having a wallet that I could carry with me that's electronic and can store data, and I can say, you know, this is what I've done. And presumably the systems will all work together. So it doesn't matter where you're working. It's not going to be defined in one way in one organization, because you're doing those interoperability kind of standards. It means it's transferable. So you're not stuck in, I have to carry on working for this company for the rest of my life, that kind of thing. So,
yeah, because they've got my learner records. So if I move on, that'll all evaporate in front of me. No, you expressed it beautifully. And so I think one question is, why is it different now than it was in the past? So we had e-portfolios. I think the difference now is that everyone's much more tech savvy. They're more confident with tech. And governments realize that the movement of labor is going to be important to their prosperity and the prosperity of their country. So using or developing these standards, as we are in the IEEE, at developing into ISO and T3 and the World Wide Web Consortium, these will become standards that governments will start endorsing. It reminds me a little bit, Fiona, of the beginning of the web, in that there were kind of attempts to do this prior to the web that we learned a lot. You're too young to remember, but I remember, so we had X25 was a way of kind of, and that was the fundamental communications protocol. We had bulletin boards, we had other kind of things. So you have this kind of, people try technology and then all of a sudden things start coming together. And I think that's where we are with learner and employment records.
Okay, that's great. And we have actually got a question. Someone has said, so ESS have asked, to what extent would qualifications providers move to the micro-credential model you describe? And what would this entail with regards to regulatory environments?
So let me deal with the last part first. Regulatory will always be the incumbent player that's kind of slow to change. I think that learners will recognize the requirement to be agile. And so there is going to be kind of this little bit of conflict there. I think with e-assessment, especially during the pandemic, that we saw this huge shift to e-assessment, online proctoring. I think we're going to feel people are going to be comfortable with doing shorter assessments more often. And so I think from a credentialing organization to break these down into micro credentials that then feed into a credential. Now, it's easy for me to pontificate that. I'm not going to have to do it. But we do see some countries in the world that are doing it, that are working out how to roll up micro credentials into credentials that will kind of enable this more free-flowing learning and credentialing and work.
And just as a personal note onto that, I've been an advocate for open badges for quite a long time.
Yes.
And one of the things about those badges have been, just as a side thing, is that when you actually have to work towards some kind of small micro credential, you're focusing on those specific sets of skills. So when you are actually asked about those things, they're in the forefront of your mind because you've reflected on those things. And so I found it gave our students more confidence in their own abilities, which you wouldn't necessarily have just by going through a general degree or even some training. It's the way you can specifically look at those niche areas, I think, that really helps. And
it's critical, and that's a critical part of the infrastructure. So these wallets are essentially going to hold badges, and badges that can be authenticated. So that we can say, well, this badge says that you studied at Harvard or UCL. So let me just check and make sure that UCL thinks you really studied there. So that badges are part of that infrastructure.
And I like the fact that you can have evidence with those two, but that's just on the side. We have Marion Talbot has just mentioned she'd love an e-portfolio or wallet to bring together all the learning from all the consultancy stuff, all the studying, and all the governing. So I think it's true, isn't it? Lots of us volunteer around different areas, and school governors, whatever, or charities. Being able to, you don't think about what it is you're learning through those things that you do, but you can actually capture that somewhere and carry it with you. I think that's wonderful. I think that's about all I carry on talking to you for a long time, but I'm not allowed to. So we will have to draw it to a close. So thank you so much for your talk for us for this afternoon. It was really interesting, and I'm hoping that we can pick up some more points in the panel later on. Thank you.
It was a real pleasure to share. Thank you so much, Fiona.
Thank you. That was wonderful. So yes, thank you again. I think we'll have a lot to talk about later on. So moving on, we need to move on now to our first award. We will be talking, we will hear from the British Council, from Sarah Pearson, who's the Director of Exams for the British Council. And she is going to present the award for the International Implementation Award.
Hello, so I'm Sarah Pearson, as mentioned. I'm Director of Examinations at the British Council. In any normal year, I'm responsible for the global delivery of around 4.5 million exams on paper, on computer and online, and that's across more than 100 countries worldwide. So I'm particularly delighted to join the E-Assessment Association Conference to announce the winner of the award for Best International Implementation 2021. The British Council is a proud sponsor of the awards and would like to congratulate all of the finalists nominated from around the world in contributing to making this year's edition more international in nature and in reach than ever before. As a global player in international assessment, the British Council supports the great work of the E-Assessment Association as it represents the truly global nature of assessment and acknowledges and recognises the advances made by those using technology to transform and enhance assessment worldwide. The awards encompass all sectors of education, from schools through higher education, to workplace training and professional exams, and that closely matches the remit of the British Council. As well as our expertise in developing and delivering our own IELTS and APDIS English language exams, we deliver a huge variety of assessments for all life stages and covering a vast array of subjects and skills on behalf of around 150 UK awarding organisations every year, as they seek to reach new markets. The Best International Implementation Award seeks to acknowledge those e-assessment organisations that have delivered innovative and effective programmes in one or more countries outside of their main country of operation. In particular, the criteria for this category seek to recognise the implementation and commercial impact of the programme rather than just the assessment aspect of the project. This year, the category was arguably one of the most diverse, attracting a variety of projects from multiple sectors and geographies, and we will now see a short video from the judges highlighting the nominated programmes.
Hello, I'm Martha Gibson and I'm on the board of the E-Assessment Association, as well as being the sponsorship secretary. This year, I'm the chair on the panel for the Best International Implementation Award. This is my third year of judging the awards, and it was an absolute privilege to work with my fellow judges, all of whom brought a wealth of experience and expertise in the assessment to the judging. They were Martin Rhodes, Tim Downey and Mike Dorr. I think I speak for all of us on the judging panel when I say that we really enjoyed reading and hearing about the innovative international projects from all the applications. Our finalists told us about the complex nature of working across borders with all of the challenges of different cultures, languages and time zones. But equally, they overcame those challenges in creative and innovative ways, proving that there are more similarities in our ways of working than there are differences. What pleased us enormously this year is that the focus is less and less UK-centric. The projects were located worldwide, but also finalists were made up of global partnerships. So however you look at it, it's truly international, and our 4 finalists demonstrated that in the nature of their partnership working as well as in their projects.
So I would like to thank all the judges who participated in reviewing the nominations and in reaching the decision on the winning project, which I'm sure was a very difficult task given the high quality of the submissions. In selecting the winner, the judges commented that this was a large and complex implementation that brought together stakeholders from across the world to improve the quality of services that affect people's lives. The team were able to demonstrate strong, positive impact with a direct improvement on people's lives. And so I am very pleased to announce that the winner of the 2021 E-Assessment Award for the Best International Implementation is ExcelSoft Technologies, with an assessment solution implemented for exam delivery across Mexico by an Indian company. Congratulations.
I feel like we should all just clap. Congratulations to ExcelSoft. What a wonderful thing to do. And Sarah, thank you very much for presenting that for us. We really appreciate your time. Thank you. Well, thank you. I think now we will have a 10-minute break. And when we come back, there'll be the next award for the Best Workplace or Talent Assessment Project. And also we'll have the panel. Thank you.
We're going to move on to the Transformational Project Award. So again, another very highly contested award out there, very kindly sponsored by RM. And I'd like to welcome Richard Little from RM to the stage to present the award.
So it's a real pleasure to be invited to present the award for Best Transformational Project. I've been working in ed tech for about 20 years now, and about half of that time I've been working within digital assessment with RM. And I've enjoyed working with so many organisations on their digital assessment transformation journey during that time. It's no surprise, therefore, that we've seen a record number of entries for the Best Transformational Project Award this year. Entries that showcase rapid adoption of technology and a real focus on realising benefits quickly.
Greetings, and my name is Therese Jacobs, and it was my pleasure and honour to be the chair of judges for the e-assessment award for Best Transformational Project in 2021. So the four finalists in this category are Cirrus Assessment and the Chartered Accountants of Ireland, whose transformational change from paper to e-assessment illustrated a positive partnership approach to ongoing transformation and a continued openness to providing tailor-made and cutting-edge assessment solutions. Our second shortlisted entry was the British Council, whose successful migration of the high-stakes ACCA exams from test centres worldwide to remote invigilation. Third shortlisted entry was the Royal College of Psychiatrists, whose rapid and creative transformation of specialist face-to-face and clinical-based exams literally enabled the progression of trainee doctors in the profession to progress to the next stage. And our final shortlisted entry was Grid Incorporated, whose AI-powered app has the ability to predict TOEFL scores quickly and accurately, and then again using the power of AI, adapts to the learner's needs and learning style.
And so the winner this year, the judges felt was strong in all areas of the criteria that we were judging on. They felt it was compelling, enthusiastic, and had a very solid set of drivers behind the transformation. The result has had a clear positive impact not only on the delivery of assessments, but also on the construction of the assessments itself. And so I'm very pleased to announce that the winner of the 2021 award for Best Transformational Project is Cirrus Assessment and the Chartered Accountants of Ireland. Congratulations.
Now we're going to move on to our panel discussion now. It's a fantastic panel I've got lined up here today. I'd be interested to know from blended from each of you to whoever wants to step forward first, really. But what do you see as being the fundamental ingredients to a successful transformational or innovation project? Who wants to answer that one first? Rory, do you want to go first?
I'll be happy to.
Excellent.
Well, I think some of them are obvious. You know, one of the key things for any transformational innovation project that I look for is, support from top to bottom, right? Absolutely critical to see that kind of stakeholder support. And when I work with, say a client and looking at a potential innovation project, I absolutely want to see that from all levels.
I'd love to certainly echo what Rory said, but I've got a few other points here. Yeah. I mean, top to bottom clearly, but then it's so critical, we've noticed, to have a champion for that innovation within the partner organization. And that it stems from that. Once you have that champion, then things can take place. But it's clear that you'd have to see what you can do to cultivate that. The other key ingredient is cultivating a challenging environment within your own organization. And I say challenging environment, what I'm trying to say is you have to intellectually push people to be able to voice their opinions, to be able to share whatever they've got on their minds through the entire innovation process from start to end.
I would echo that. I absolutely would. And I think in my mind, there are three things. One is design constraints. So that's really looking at just the physicality of what your end users got to grapple with when you're trying to either sell your product or develop your product. And that could be anything from the time in a timetable to the physical space, financial considerations, teacher confidence. In our case, we're working with schools, and the curriculum and assessment requirements that they have to answer to. And then out of that, developing your design plan. So really understanding what pedagogy and classroom context you're dealing with, and how you're going to match and develop your assessment framework. We talk about assessments here.
We're probably building a bit on some of the points from Claudia. Actually, I think, one of the real fundamentals is to make sure you're always putting the users at the centre of everything, whether that's the teachers or subject matter experts that are authoring items, or obviously the candidate as well that's taking the assessment. Kind of don't forget how important it is to understand their needs, take feedback as you pilot and trial kind of iterations into assessment models, because ultimately, you've got a whole user base there that we really want to focus on educating people, improving learning outcomes, and for candidates to get the best learning experience. And so that that needs to be front and center of everything that we're working on, really.
So how can organisation innovate better in a post-COVID world? So has anyone got any quick thoughts on that one?
Now, as quite a few folks of you are probably aware, we're tucked away on the other side of the globe. We're in Canada. And pre-pandemic, it was always a situation where we had to adapt to an environment where we could remotely work with them from here in Canada. And so we had to, use Skype, use a whole lot of different tools that were available at that point and make it work, do what it takes to make it work. And we had to also get our partners to buy into that idea or become comfortable with the fact that you have to work remotely if you want to be working with organizations internationally like this. Now, what the pandemic did was it broke that divide beautifully. I mean, that whole barrier was literally taken away because the mindset changed.
COVID's been a lever, particularly in schools and colleges sector, to let go of some key things that were almost set in stone. You had to have face-to-face staff meetings. You had to have all of these documents produced for you. They couldn't be, a whole raft of things that I think COVID has given us a window of opportunity. But of course, things can always revert back. So post-COVID, the challenge, I think, for companies and for school and college leaders is to make sure that they learn the best parts from the COVID situation, the COVID way of working, and employ them in their post-COVID working.
Welcome, guys. Congratulations, everyone. Huge achievements. Let's start with Aftab at Bolton College.
We're tackling a very big problem that's universal across the education sector around formative assessment, and that is the ability for a computer to mediate the opening, the teacher's ability to pose open-ended questions to a student.
I know when we were in the final stages, a lot of tough competition, but I know from, I suppose, there's been a huge amount of work has gone in, and I suppose we're a professional body. We're the third oldest accountancy body in the world, so we're dealing with highly regulated environments and high stakes exams, and obviously accountants being very risk adverse, it was a tough journey to bring a lot of people and stakeholders on a journey of massive innovation at speed.
I think this is a very good example of what you can achieve if the vendor and the customer works together in true partnership and really put their shoulders behind it and work together. So, and of course, a huge thanks to Ian for being a visionary who wants to go where no man has gone, as he says it himself. Yeah. So I think this is a very good example of collaboration.
A quick thank you to all our sponsors of today's session. So PSI for awards headline sponsor, Bretta and RM for sponsoring the awards, much appreciated.
Hello and welcome back. I hope you've had a nice break. I'm very excited now to begin our presentation of the next award. Please don't forget, if you have any comments, any questions that you'd like to be put forward to the panel when we meet later on, please use the comments and we'll be delighted to ask them for you. So it's my great pleasure to introduce the presenter for the next award, the Best Workplace or Talent Assessment Project. It's Patrick Craven, who's the Executive Director for Strategic Partnerships, Policy and Stakeholders at City and Guilds. So, hello.
Hiya, and thank you very much, Fiona. My name's Patrick Craven, Director of Policy and Stakeholder Partnerships, as Fiona said, at City and Guilds. And it really is a privilege and a pleasure to sponsor this category and to continue our long-standing support of the work of the Assessment Association. For those of you who don't know City and Guilds, we're an awarding organisation that's been in existence for over 140 years, and we certificate millions of learners each year, both across the UK and globally. We began our life triggered by the demands of the first industrial revolution. Our focus then was on preparation for working life and accreditation programmes that would support career progression and entry to work. This was driven by a need to reform and innovate the education system of the time to ensure opportunity for all as the demand for skilled labour grew. I think, therefore, it's highly appropriate, therefore, that we now find ourselves supporting the importance of workforce or talent assessment projects at the advent of the fourth industrial revolution, a topic that you heard Eric discuss so eloquently at the start of this session. It's also highly relevant that we support the work of the Assessment Association to ensure that innovative thinking, embracing new technologies, drives the evolution of our industry. For us, the consequence of not changing and standing still has never been an option if we wish to remain relevant. I was pleased to hear the conversation earlier exploring the role of digital credentials, as this is an area of accreditation we're already pioneering within the field of lifelong learning, where large chunks of qualification achievement are not always appropriate or relevant. I think the importance of recognising workforce potential to identify new talent sources has quite simply been accelerated by the situation we've faced over the last 15 months. Now more than ever, employers must make even more effective use of their existing workforce and seek out and discover new sources of talent. In the prelim videos to this session, we were reminded of the need to address these emerging skills gaps and disparity of opportunity. And Eric's talk and the work of the IEEE Task Force are vital developments in the standardisation of measurement models. The Best Workplace or Talent Assessment Project is a new award for 2021. The award seeks to acknowledge an assessment project or solution which brings clearly identifiable benefits to workplace or talent assessment in a specific field or fields. It's a new award in such an important and impactful area for assessment innovation. We hope that this will be the first of many rounds of excellent submissions for such a critical sector for our industry and global economies as we all build back from the pandemic. To remind the audience of this year's very worthy finalists, we have a short video to play recorded by the chair of the panel judging award for the Best Workplace or Talent Assessment Project, Graham Hudson, E-Assessment Association Secretary and Independent Consultant at GA Partnerships Limited. So let's take a moment to look at this video now.
Hello, I'm Graham Hudson, Secretary to the EAA and Chair of the Judges of the Best Workplace and Talent Assessment Project Award. First, I'd like to say at the outset, thank you to my panel of judges, Chris Peat of Axia, Leon Symington of the Chartered Insurance Institute, and Linda Stedman of Ecom Scotland. Their contribution was invaluable, and I know that they enjoyed the process. We were very impressed with the two organisations shortlisted. Both organisations demonstrated a keen interest and passion in the outcome of their projects, and with clear commitment from their supporting teams. First was TCS Iron with the National Qualifier Test. This project was about giving access to workplace interviews for students leaving college and higher education. Instead of corporations attempting to visit as many college and university campuses as they could to interview candidates, TCS set up the National Qualifier Test instead. The judges were impressed with this submission. The rationale and narrative were clear and the story told was compelling. The project was a natural response to the COVID-19 challenge, but as we've seen so much this year, had significant benefits that will outlast the changes in recruitment practices seen so far. The project demonstrated a combination of good assessment practice, using general cognitive assessment, specialist subject psychometric behavior analysis, and validating post-test interviews. The reasons for the choice of approaches were clear and comprehensively articulated. In particular, the judges considered that the extension of opportunity to university graduates to join large corporates by almost 4 times addressed a long-term failure of the existing face-to-face methods of recruitment on campus. COVID-19 aside, the use of the National Qualifier Test is a game changer for both employers and students. The impact of the changes and benefits for the job seekers were clearly explained. TCS overcame initial implementation problems, which were almost inevitable in a project of this scale. They took into account the natural anxieties that job seekers would feel in using an online system, and provided a means for them to feed back on the experience and on their engagement with the test. In addition, they improved the technological mechanisms to prevent malpractice using some innovative approaches. The NQT has had a significant impact on so many people seeking to join the workplace, providing a scalable, secure, and authentic approach. The potential global impact could be enormous. And next we looked at Psi Services, a project called A Question of Care. Is a care career for you? This project was initiated by a charitable customer of Psi Services that wished to encourage those who were interested in a care career to explore this further. It provided a means of exploring what caring involved, as well as providing a measure of fit for the individual. A comprehensive set of support materials was produced as part of the project. The judges were also impressed by this project. The context of carer support was particularly pertinent because of the impact that the pandemic has had on so many lives. In addition, the passion that the PSI Services team demonstrated to the work was apparent, and the commitment to the best outcome for the client showed through. The choice of assessment instruments was well justified, and the use of video in that respect was innovative. The resources committed to the video production in both English and Welsh was considerable, and its combination with the situational judgment tests suited this context well. The inclusion of values through the use of behavioural assessments was a particular note. The judges noted the extensive stakeholder engagement that had taken place in the preparation of the materials and assessments, including the use of workshops and the engagement of a specialist subject matter expert to keep the project on track. The use of a digital accessibility centre to assess the appropriateness of materials was of particular interest. A roadmap for continual development was apparent through continued engagement by PSI with the client and annual reviews. The judges considered that this project made an important contribution to the field of caring for others, and that the commitment and innovation showed by PSI was commendable. And I hope that you'll join us for the awards ceremony and conference itself and see which of these two has become the worthy winner of the award this year.
Thank you very much, Graham, for that video. I'm sure you'll agree that both were very worthy finalists. The decision to confirm the award for the winning project hinged on the benefit that the project gave to the key stakeholders and users, providing significant life-changing opportunities to many that would not have been available previously, a principle that fits so well with our organisational purpose and embraced innovation as an agent of change. The judges agreed that the winner met the overriding aim of the award by being set squarely in the realm of identifying talent in the workplace, together with the scale of implementation and extensive reach of the service. And so I'm delighted to announce that the winner of the 2021 award for the Best Workplace or Talent Assessment Project is Tata Consultancy Services Limited with the TCS National Qualifier Test. Congratulations.
Round of applause. Congratulations to Tata. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Patrick. That was really wonderful. And thank you again for sponsoring this award from City and Guilds. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Hello and welcome. Now we have the chance to speak to our panel. So this is wonderful. The lineup for the panel is for the New Frontiers of Assessment is Eric, who was our keynote. You've seen him earlier talking, the Executive Director of Talent Transformation. Ali Shalfrooshan, who's the Head of International Assessment, Research and Development at PSI. Patrick, who we've just spoken to from City and Guilds. Paul Muir from the Head of Technology Enabled Assessment at British Council, and Graham, who we've just heard from, the judge of the panel for the International Assessment Award. So welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, so we don't have a long time to chat, and we could talk for hours and hours, would be wonderful. But I thought we might be, just to start us all off, if maybe we have a light question, a nice question, something about you and something about what's inspired you in your careers. So what's been one book, person, film, something that's happened to you that has been an inspiration for your career and why? And I think we'll start with Graham. You're on my left.
Well, hello, everybody, and thank you very much, Fiona. There's a guy called David Sandler that I came across in 2013. It was at a point in my life when I decided that I wish to move from corporate life and do something on my own. It's one of those little breaks in Eric's chart, you know, changing from one thing to the other. So at the age of 57, I thought I really don't want to be stuck here until I'm 60 and retire and just sort of go into a blob. And this led me to take up a franchise with an organization called Sandler Training, which had been founded by this guy, David Sandler, in the 1980s. And I described that experience ultimately as the most expensive CPD that I've ever done in my life, if you know what franchises cost. But I learned a huge amount. I think some of my clients might have learned something along the way, but I learned a lot about myself, how to manage my self-esteem, behaviors, the importance of that. And that has stood me in great stead, I think, for this next phase of my career.
Wonderful. Thank you. Patrick, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fascinating question, and I think I'm going to. I was reflecting on it and thinking, actually, I'm probably one of these people who finds it difficult to identify one particular source of inspiration, because I find that I'm inspired, you know, often on a daily basis, simply by the experiences that you have, by the people that you meet, the things that you get involved in. You know, I'm going to do one shameless plug for the page is the Talent Transformation, which, and I would thoroughly recommend it as a book. Actually, it says a lot. It's got a lot of interest and insights into how we think differently. But also, just another shameless plug. So, in terms of this concept of recent things just inspiring you, a book that I read recently called The Midnight Library, which talks about the possibility of living alternate lives that you perhaps never took as a previous opportunity, and not to live life with regrets, just to live life as best you can from the experience that you can draw from every day.
Wise advice. Wise advice. Excellent. Thank you. Ali, what would be your inspirational book, person, thing?
Yeah, it's a hard one, because I have a similar story of, I think everybody on the panel has, of you've worked with lots of people who's inspired you, and you've worked on projects which inspire you, and so kind of like focusing in on what piece of media, I actually struggled, and I feel like I'm going to lose credibility immediately for what I'm about to say. But I was, so obviously I work as a business psychologist and I work in the talent management sphere. And one of the things which inspired me to consider it as a vocation was strangely the first series of Big Brother, where they had psychologists. There's one episode where the psychologists kind of review the behaviour of the people, and this is where there was some attempt to pretend that this wasn't just complete voyeuristic nonsense. There was some form of psychology in there, but I think it was something about being able to review and manage how people behave and how that impacts on others and situations, and then that led me to read more around the area, etc. So I think it was, despite it not being the most auspicious of starts, I feel like it inspired me to think of psychology more broadly, because as a job, as a vocation versus so that's mine.
I was not expecting that, but that was good. That was good.
Thank you.
Eric.
Well, I think I feel a bit like Graham and Patrick. I think Patrick said it. To pick one specific thing is kind of a challenge. I can tell you that when you try and explain something to someone and they explain how stupid you are, that's a fantastic learning moment. And so to have the courage to kind of reach out and try and explain what you know is helpful, because you get fantastic feedback. And so I do read a lot, and I use audiobooks a lot. So I have a beautiful dog. I walk him every morning. And so 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes in the evening, I'm listening to my audiobooks, which is, and I encourage everyone to do that kind of thing. One book that did spring to mind, and I think it was triggered by what Ali said, which was Thinking in Bets. And it's this concept that professional gamblers are kind of betting on the odds, and they know that, they'll win and they'll lose. And I think kind of life's a bit like that, and our careers are a bit like that, and the decisions we make in life are a bit like that, you're never guaranteed certainty, but you're better off placing a bet and going for it than, sitting and watching TV all day.
Excellent. Yeah. Another twist there is interesting. And finally, Paul, but not least.
So I'm actually more of a pictures person than a words person, so that's a different way to put it. So I think Paul Nicklin is a wildlife photographer who I've followed for a long while, and I'm a Canadian guy, and I think captures everything around sort of inspired about nature and sort of the link between wildlife and education. If you let me go on that journey, I think both need protecting. I think both are evolving in how we live with that, and both are essential to our well-being. So to me, looking at that and my passion outside of education is wildlife, is photography, is going on those sort of adventures. So that's something to me I look at every day and think, if we can protect that and we can advance education in the way and use that education to help advance protection of wildlife, then that's me. So it's a different slant on it, but that gets me going.
That's interesting. It just shows how varied we all are, the different things that just for the sake of fairness, one of the books that I read recently, a couple of years ago now, was by Cathy O'Neill. It's Weapons of Math Destruction. And it was all about algorithms and how they are used, and how basically we need to be able to recognize the impact they might have on people, and how we can make sure that they're used for good and not for bad, which is what we're here for. That's why we're here. Wonderful. Okay, so I have another question really about your own frontier moments. So in your careers, what was your frontier moment? When did things change, or when did you take a different direction in something in your careers, and what impact did it have on you? So we'll start with Paul. We'll start with you now, because we'll go backwards.
Okay. Grant, so, I think for me, I've been in assessment for about 20 odd years now, since I left university, and the thing for me, I think, is when I moved into consultancy, and that took me overseas to work with in the Middle East a lot of times, in Dubai and Saudi Arabia and Qatar. And I think working in some of those overseas locations, and the work we do with the British Council as well, sort of made me sort of realise how we need to get equity or within assessment, and how allow people to have equal opportunities within that. And that was the sort of thing for me. And sort of ever since then, really, everything I've tried to do is thinking about how we can achieve that, how we can help people go on that journey, and then also with e-assessment, how we can use technology to help people reach that. So that was my moment. That's the thing that I say is driving what we do today.
Excellent. It's a worthy cause. Eric, how about you?
Well, mine is going to go back to the 80s. So before most of you were born. So I originally from the UK, I was transferred to run a company in the US and did that for a while. And then there was a dispute, which I would classify as an ethical dispute, that I disagreed with the management's ethics. I was on a 3-month notice. I had it in my notice. I worked, I think, up until about 10 o'clock on my last day of employment. And the following day, I was, let me tell you, I was earning a lot and spending a lot. And then I got to reflect the following day, and I said, oh, my goodness, I have no money coming in. I still have all these bills that I've been generating. And so I better, kind of get my act together and think about my future. And that was a time of reflecting, like, what do I enjoy? What are my core competencies? How can I leverage that into my new career? And there's a couple of other times in my life I've been through a similar kind of time of reflection. And I think it's, there was also, don't get caught up in everything you're doing at the moment. Maybe you should be reflecting more often than every 4 or 5 years.
Yes, absolutely. Ali?
I think it's hard to kind of think about like new frontiers and not think about clients and how they kind of facilitate that journey. I think usually the more demanding the client, the more you get to learn. So I think for me, when I reflect on times where I have been kind of like able to push things forward is when there's a client demanding things which haven't been done before, and then you having to work out a means and a way to achieve that in a way which is both reliable, tangible, and is based on as much on what should work, given the context being slightly more different or challenging than it was before. So I think it's those occasions where you are kind of asked to be kind of put outside your comfort zone and then working out back from what that client's requirements are, what is reasonable, and then actually how do you achieve that in a way where the likelihood of success is as high as conceivably possible. So yeah, whenever I think about that question, I think about those clients who may have been a little bit more challenging, but then it's great to be forced to be put in that position where you have to find a way around a problem which you wouldn't have wanted to solve originally.
Excellent. Yeah, helps you think, makes you think. Patrick, how about you?
I think probably I'd reflect on sort of, I often reflect on those kind of pivot moments in your career, in those, I guess, going back to sort of Eric's sort of model there of those sort of little blips or change points in your career. So, I mean, from an educational basis, I'm an artist and a designer by background, and I can remember going, but was torn at the time about whether I wanted to follow a teaching profession or go into art and design. And I can remember going to Warwick, where the teaching professor at the end of the interview sort of concluded, actually, I think you need to go and follow an art and design career, and if you still want to do teaching, you can come back to it. Probably said an awful lot about my interview, to be honest, in terms of the results of that. And so I did go and follow art and design, and my first job as a graphic designer was actually with what was a pioneering organisation at the time in the UK called MESU, which then became NCT and then became Bector. People might remember it more as Bector in latter years, the technology agency for education in the UK. And so I was very fortuitous in that I was exposed to two things. One, I was exposed to my discipline being impacted by technology. So I came into the design industry at the time when the Apple Mac was really starting to penetrate the industry, and was playing around with the internet and exchanging files, decades ago in terms of doing those things, but also recognizing that actually the technology didn't make you a designer. The technology was a very, very useful tool if you knew how to design, and so therefore recognized the role that technology could play, and through that was exposed to a lot of advances being made in the education field across a whole range of courses and disciplines about where technology was being used. And from there, went and got a job with an awarding organisation looking at their technology qualifications, and the rest is kind of history from there. But I guess it's kind of an example of how sometimes you kind of come full circle in terms of sort of an initial intent, and then you still land in an educational space, albeit from a different perspective.
But yeah, all the things you picked up along the way have helped shape how you do
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And Graham, how about you?
Yeah, just think about the technology that Patrick mentioned there. When I left teaching and I started work at the Associated Examining Board, my most exciting piece of technology was a self-correcting golf ball typewriter, which transformed all our work. No, but seriously, but my I suppose pivotal moment that I'd see differentiates between regular exam work and different exam work, if you like, was when I was at QCA. I was running the marking of national tests for 11-year-olds and 14-year-olds. That was a huge project, marking 10 million tests in the space of 10 weeks. We moved 80,000 packages by parcel force around the country in 2 weeks and collected, I can't even remember how many, somewhere around 4 million lines of data, all to give to the Secretary of State for performance tables to 99.9% accuracy and completeness. And you can see how seared on my brain those numbers are. But I was constantly plagued by schools writing to me to say they didn't like my marking. I really don't know why, but particularly in discursive subjects, where things were not right or wrong. And it led me to put in for money that the Labour government was putting up for public services at the time called Investor Save Budget. And to get this money, you had to involve other public bodies. So I went round to Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and I just said, would you like some money? And the answer to that, you can imagine, was yes. And within the space of a week, and with some help from some very able people at PKF, who I still keep in touch with, we put in a bid to David Blunkett, and nobody was more surprised than I was when I got £3.5 million to spend on this research project. And bearing in mind that's 20 years ago. And once I got it, I thought, well, what the dickens do I do with it now? Anyway, that led to some of the major work that we did that still was the bedrock of stuff in some of the other nationalities in the UK, but led me on to the scanning of scripts and imaging. And eventually I decided to leave QCA and take a bit of a risk and went into commerce. Never regretted it. It was probably the best 10 years of my life where I had the most fun. And I think was one of those moments that was a sea change in the way that large scale operations work, not driven by the financial efficiencies, of which there were some, but in my mind, the quality improvement that we could get in terms of outcomes for students and making their life chances better.
That's amazing. That's really interesting. I had no idea about the £3.5 million, but thank you for sharing that. Well, again, and for me, my new frontier moment was when I bought a computer for the first time in 1997, I think it was. This massive machine that came with everything. I had no idea how it all worked. And so I took the opportunity to do a free course at my local college, Woman Returner, it was called. And from that, I did basically I did an HNC in Business Information Technology as a woman returner, so it was free, which is amazing. And then they offered me a job, and I went from being a mum to suddenly being someone that was doing systems analysis and design and programming and web design. It was amazing, and it completely changed my life and then put me on this trajectory to become a teacher and a lecturer in IT, and then working, and the rest is history. So yeah, but all of these moments are captured for me in the way I reflect on things, and that's why I became interested in portfolios, and that's why I became interested in technology, and the blending of those two things together are really important. So we have a question actually from the people watching, and do you think that courses like the new T-levels will improve the learning process and the readiness? So who would like to take that one first off? Okay, Patrick.
Yeah, I think actually I can see it's just been updated, because I assume they meant readiness for work rather than just readiness in general. Yeah, I mean, look, the T-levels, I think, are a very important recognition of the role. If people aren't familiar with what they are, it's the technical level qualification intervention program in England at the moment at level 3, so 16 to 18-year-olds. I think they're a very important recognition of the value of technical education, alongside perhaps the more well-trodden path of general academic qualifications. Whether they of themselves will improve the learning process, I'm not entirely sure, because I don't think the qualification of itself is the only thing that improves the learning process. I think they will lead to a more rounded awareness of occupational pathways for the learners that embark on them if they're delivered well. And I think by association, given the fact that they also have quite a significant industry placement component within them, should prepare those learners better for the world of work and employment once they transition from a T-level. So in theory, yes, they should. It's early days yet for the T-levels. The first ones only just launched last year. Not a great year to launch anything, I wouldn't suggest, in the educational sector. So, you know, I think we have to wait and see, let them bed down and see what the impact will be. But in principle, they should do.
Excellent. Does anyone else have anything else to
Well,
add?
Patrick, I'm really happy that you explained that, because when I saw T-levels, I thought there's now an exam for afternoon tea. I thought maybe it's hospitality or something. So thanks for the explanation.
I think my only observation would be, I don't know about the application in the way that Patrick does, because he's much closer to this, but I do remember the consultation on T-levels and the structuring of it, and I was particularly struck by the fact that there were missed opportunities, I thought, in terms of the way that they were structured, and there was a great opportunity to start thinking about how we could use the digital environment, and I thought it was a great shame that that wasn't pursued.
Okay, right. It's always the way there. Maybe they'll look back and reflect on it, and improvements will be on the way. So talking about improvements, given improvements in technology for assessments, what shape should learning and assessment take in order to be more adaptable and relevant and support lifelong learning mindsets? Anyone like to start us off with that?
Well, if I could jump in here. So one, I think smaller, bite-sized learning and decision support systems, so people can work out which of the competencies they want to develop, which competencies they want endorsed by a credential, and then in the way of building these micro credentials into a larger credential. So it's that's what I would like to see.
Anybody else have anything to say about that mindset?
Yeah, I mean, I would totally echo what Eric's just said. I think I alluded to it slightly in my preface to the award when I mentioned the work that we're doing with credentials already. I think one of the fundamental things that we have to get right is design a curriculum in such a way that it can support large programs, so it can support something which is delivered in 16 to 18-year-old compulsory education, but equally it can be disaggregated in ways that allow people at later stages of their lives to engage with relevant components and pick up, because the reality is that many people in their working life don't need to go back and do a 2-year full-time program of study, even if they had the luxury to be able to do so. What many people always need to be able to do is to reflect on how they can maintain the currency of their skill set and their capabilities, and that requires a far more atomized system. And I think, therefore, for me, the relationship is between the design of curriculum, the delivery of learning, and the connection with assessment opportunities. If we can get those things right, I think you can design a very flexible and dynamic system. Sometimes policy works against us, I think, in that respect. But you know, I think there's the prize, I think.
I think I'd echo what Patrick's saying on that story as well. Is I think we're still seeing too many organisations, too many awarding organisations, particularly, sort of just pushing a paper and pen exercise onto technology without thinking about how that assessment is taking forward. So I think we're still in a position where, probably with high stakes exams, we're still seeing that journey, and I think it needs almost people to. Can people have the opportunity to step back, look at that, how they're assessing people, and redesign it? Because I think at the moment we've made probably short steps towards using technology, but we're not embracing, we're not using it how it probably should be used at this stage.
I mean, we're definitely in a moment now, aren't we, where we seem to have the right level of speed of connection generally, and we definitely have the people with the expertise and the knowledge to build that up. It's just raising awareness amongst the policymakers and the people that implement things like the curriculum, and how do they join those kind of things up. It's quite a difficult job to persuade people that don't really understand and who are making decisions about it. So talking about making decisions and things, we know that we're in the pandemic. We are still in the pandemic. We are trying to come out of the pandemic. It has been a whirlwind for the world. You know, it's changed everything. What do you think has been the more positive impacts on digital assessment in particular, and in education, training and lifelong learning, of this moment that we're in, the COVID moment? Ali, would you like to start with that? Sorry.
Yeah, I think the key things which are really obvious, us sitting here right now, having a conference virtually, I think the assumption that, you know, which some of the challenges around, you know, on paper versus digital, I think that argument has been kind of very clearly answered. And I think as a society, I think we're all very now accustomed to the world of the digital, maybe too accustomed. But from a perspective of delivery of assessments digitally, I think there is now a much larger acceptance around that as a fair, safe, reliable route. And I think that kind of shift in kind of mindset around technology, I think, is something which is palpable, and it's not just happening in one location, it's happening around the world. Everyone's experienced the same event at the same time. So I think there's going to be a lot more of an emphasis and evolution around, okay, how do we actually, so we've won one argument around, okay, digital is the way to go. I think going back to a comment made earlier around, actually, now if digital is the way to go, okay, how do we actually fully incorporate all the benefits of that in a way that enables learning or assessment to be done more effectively? So I think so the good news is that I think that argument's been shifted. I think, you know, education as a whole has been delivered virtually for a huge proportion of society. So again, there is an acceptance level which is there. I think the next step is really how do we take advantage of it in a way which gets the best learning outcomes for the individual and for the organisation.
Move on now, kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Eric, did you want to say something as well?
Yeah, other positive advantages, and I agree with everything that was said. Other positive advantages, I think people have got that e-learning's real and it can be deployed at a massive scale, and where people say, well, it's nice, you know, for regulatory compliance stuff, but now it's like it's real, it's big. And secondly, we saw a lot of organizations that said, we want to retain our people, but they have nothing to do. So let's start educating them. Let's start opening up these e-learning platforms to massive populations. And we saw, particularly in the IT industry, that IT consultants couldn't go on site to help consult. So the large organizations were training people and then testing them. That scaled up. In the beginning, it was kind of bumps in the road, but it scaled up and proved that online proctoring is valid, reliable. Massive amounts of data was collected to prove the fears around cheating and etc. So I think it gave us a vision of our future, and we were forced into it. I think you asked earlier about change. You know, sometimes we're on a burning platform. We just have to change. And I think this was a burning platform, forced us to change. And I think there were some missed opportunities. So in education, I think we could have spent time helping people to learn at a distance instead of just trying to keep teaching the same subjects online. We could have said, well, let's take a pause back. Let's just take a month and say, how do we learn at a distance? How do we learn with, how do we become self-motivated? But some large organizations did that. From my limited experience, we didn't quite do that as well in regular education.
Okay. Anybody else, Graham?
I just wanted to say, from a slightly different viewpoint, I'm a governor of a junior school, and we worked very hard, the staff worked very hard to ensure access for students. And that had positive effects in 2 or 3 ways. One, those who were studying from home had the opportunity to engage in a way, particularly in an oral way that they didn't necessarily have in the classroom, which was a level of engagement that was very positive for them. The other was because there weren't quite so many children in the school, those with special educational needs or who were on pupil premium were given more attention actually in the classroom, which was beneficial to them. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that I think emerged from that was more thoughtful teaching. You know, there was a pause. What are we teaching? How are we teaching? Mm-hmm. How we facilitate learning? And what are the lessons that we can learn from this hybrid environment that we've had to work in that can be beneficial and continued in the future? And I think it's that examining of what are we doing and how can we use all the tools we've got available to the benefit of our pupils and students.
It's changed everything, really, hasn't it? And Paul, did you like to?
Yeah, I think on it's just we've just been talking about how we've taken everything digital, but I think what we're now seeing also is I'll call it a backlash, and then people can say it's not as bad as that. But I think the people around legal and privacy concerns now saying, I think Eric's point, we've collected a lot of data. Where's that data going? And how is it being used? And so I think that's potentially the next challenge of all of this is we've gone through a pandemic where people have, I think, accepted that things are different, things are being done differently. People have sacrificed maybe privacy for the trade-off of education, for the trade-off of assessment. So I think there's a big move, I think, coming in the next probably 12 months, 18 months, where people start to say, is this normal? Is this okay? And I think we have to start to deal with those issues, I think, as people like the British Council and I guess people like PSI and City and Guilds will be dealing with those with their assessments. And just as a second point, I think I would add that one of the things we've seen during the last 12 months is it's fantastic how places where you'd never think would be able to access this education in certain parts of the world have accessed it through these digital means, through these new technology means. And that's part of what we're doing. Part of where our mission is to try and get that education to as many people as possible in the most secure way as possible. So I think that's been a real highlight. If you want to say find a highlight in a bad year, that's for something that we have seen the world adapt, I think, in places where we'd never think they would adapt.
Excellent. Yeah. And Patrick.
Yeah, I think just to echo all those points, I think my observation would be they kind of say that necessity is the mother of invention. Actually, I think necessity is the mother of acceptance. And I think what you've seen is in the space of probably about 3 to 6 months, a step change in some of the adoption of technology that we've been working decades to try and penetrate aspects of learning and assessment. And I think what it's meant is that there was a different tolerance to accepting the way of doing something differently because you had to. And then what they found is actually, you know what? It wasn't as bad as we thought. Remote invigilation can work, and we can trust people to do things properly. Remote face-to-face interview, Vivas, etc., can work. You can elicit just as much information, like this remote issue could face-to-face. Clearly, there are some things which are more difficult for us to say you could do it. I think the old chestnut is the degree to which simulation can ever truly replace absolute practical application and skills. And although you see it having a place in formative assessment, I think there's still, various debates about whether it will truly always replace or completely replace the absolute practical activity. But I think we've seen a sea change in some areas of acceptance. Having said all of that, I do worry that the high tide of innovation may well recede back onto sort of the rocks of challenge as we start to come out of the pandemic. So I think we just need to be careful about the things that we have to reset and the things that could persist, and how we find the right balance between those things going forwards.
So we don't lose the progress that we've made across the sectors. And I completely agree. Well, I'm afraid we don't have any more time to chat, and I'd love to. We have more comments and things in the chat, but thank you so much to everybody for participating in our panel today. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you all, and keep thinking, keep collecting, and get your wallets out. That's the good thing. Thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks a lot.
Hello, and thank you for helping us join in with the chat there with the panel. I now have an opportunity to talk to the winners of the awards. Hello.
Hi, Fiona. Good afternoon.
Hello, lovely to see you both.
Hi, Fiona.
Congratulations. Hello. How exciting. This really is an international award. It's wonderful. And the best implementation was fantastic. And it's so good that we can talk to each other, isn't it? It's just, it's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So do you want to say a little bit, Satya, would you like to say a little bit about
yeah, absolutely. So Fiona, first of all, thank you so much. And we are really honored. And I know, like, in today's world, how difficult is all of us trying to make some difference. And it's really great to be recognized by EA. And of course, there's no introduction needed by EA and all. We are part of the organization since a couple of years, and we see the kind of work what you guys do. And it's really great pleasure to be recognized. And it really gives a lot of motivation to continue the good work for the society.
Wonderful. Congratulations again. Thank you.
Thank you.
And AJ.
Hi, good evening. First of all, I would like to thank the e-assessment organization and the juries for giving us this award. It's a great achievement. For us, 850 of us, Excellence, how we call ourselves. We've been in this industry, we've been in this arena for almost 20 years, keeping a low profile and implementing complicated solutions, addressing the pain points of customers globally. So I think it's a worthy award that we got finally. I think probably this is the first year we participated in this, and we were finalists in 2 categories. One was the innovative product, and second was this. So really glad. If not for the curfew we have here because of the pandemic, we would probably dancing in the streets. Thank you very much.
It's wonderful. It's really great that we can share this with you, and we're so happy that you've won your awards. It's wonderful. Thank you very much again, and thank you for taking the time to come on and say a few words. Thank you.
No problem. It's a pleasure. Thank you very much again.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Take care.
Well, I think we've come to the end of our event. Thank you so much to everybody that's participated, and thank you again to our sponsors, our headline sponsors, PSI, and thank you to City and Guilds, and thank you to the British Council. We're so happy to be able to present awards. It's a nice thing to be able to do in these particular trying times, but it's good that we can do that and keep promoting the use of e-assessment across the different sectors. And training, as we said, is the new one for us. It's exciting to be able to see where that's going to go. So thank you all once again. Thank you for joining us. We're very happy to be able to talk to you all in this conference, and we're looking forward to the last one next week, where we will be looking at the future and what the future holds. So next week we'll have Charles Vidal, founder and chairman for the Centre for Curriculum Redesign. Building Assessment for the Future is next week on the 29th at the same time. So we're looking forward to seeing you all there. So thank you again. Thank you very much.